Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Again, this is for chapter 9. This is dealing with decimals. This is purely optional. This is just for those who, wish to continue learning while we are at home and to finish some of the other topics we were supposed to cover that we probably aren't going to get to this year. All right, so this one says relate tenths and decimals. The essential question, how can you record tenths as fractions and decimals? Seems pretty straightforward. So it says Ty is reading a book about metamorphic rocks. He has read 7/10 of the book. What decimal describes the part of the book Ty has read? So the decimal is a number with one or more digits to the right of the decimal point. You can write tenths and hundredths as fractions or decimals. Okay, so one way is to use a model and a place value chart. So these are just kind of our drawing pictures and things. So it says shade 7/10 of the model. So since there are 10 boxes, I'm going to try my best to make sure I only get 7 of them. Okay. So how do I write 7/10 as a decimal? Well, the easiest way for me is to like kind of head over to that. Oh, I'm sorry. They want us to write that as a fraction. My bad. So over here, we're going to go, oh no, that doesn't make sense because they wrote that right there. I don't know what they want us to do. Right. Because like they did that and they did that. Okay, well, we're going to leave that blank for right now. We're going to go over to the decimal chart one because this is the way I find the easiest in order to be able to do this. Now, it's important to recognize this picture and to be able to tell me what it is in terms of a decimal, which we'll get to in a minute. But as far as converting from 7/10 into some decimal form, using the chart is the easiest. So this decimal point is barely visible. I'm going to make it a little bigger. All right, so they have here, they show us some ones, the tenths, the hundredths. Now, if this is pronounced 7/10, that tells me I have a 7 in my tenths place. That's all I have. There's nothing more. Therefore, my answer is just 0.7. If you want to put the 0 in front, you are welcome to. I don't normally. You may find some math teachers that require it. I don't. As long as I can clearly see your decimal point, you're okay. Now, how do I read that or how do I say that? Well, we say it the exact same way we say the fraction. It would be 7/10. And again, I don't know what they wanted us to write over there. I guess they wanted us to write 7. I don't know. But those are both the same, which also means you should be able to recognize that if I have 7 of these 10 bars colored in, that is also 0.7. All right, so another way they tell us we can do this is look at a number line. And they gave us one. How nice of them. It says label the number line with decimals that are equivalent to the fractions. Locate the point 7/10. All right, so they just kind of went along and said, okay, well, this is 0. 1/10 means I have a 1 in the tenths place. 2/10 means I have a 2. 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. Notice when we get to 10/10, oh, you can't see that on my screen here. Move that over. When we get to 10/10, 10/10 is a whole because I have all of them. Okay, let me zoom back out a second there. Nope, I moved over this one. I physically moved over. Moved back. All right. So blank names the same amount as the fraction 7/10, and that would be the 0.7. So then if we can kind of flip it and go backwards, it says, how can you write 0.1 as a fraction? Explain. Well, if I say that decimal properly, that's 1/10. Well, that kind of just gave me the answer, didn't it? So if this is 1/10, then the fraction would be 1/10. So hopefully that makes sense. So the math talk on here says, explain how the size of one whole is related to the size of 1/10. Well, if we think about this in terms of a fraction, if I have 1/10, how many tenths do I need to make a whole? We kind of talked about this a lot when we talked about fractions. Well, if I need 10 tenths to make a whole, then 1/10 is 1/10 the size of a whole. Kind of nifty how that works. All right, I'm going to erase this so we can go to the next page. Let's see. All right, so now we have a little girl riding her bike. Tara rode her bicycle 1 6/10 miles. What decimal describes how far she rode her bicycle? You have already written a fraction as a decimal. You can also write a mixed number as a decimal. So again, shading in the model, if I have 1 6/10, the whole one implies that this entire box, I have all of those plus 6 of these. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and if I were to write that as a decimal, I have one whole. Remember, the dot separates it, and 6/10. So my tenths place is a 6. So if I come over here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make my decimal a little bigger so you can see it. My one whole goes in the ones place. How many tenths do I have? I have 6. Now they gave me this hundredths place, but I don't need it because I only have tenths. I don't have any hundredths, so I can ignore that. So I would write this as 1.6. And how do I read that? This is the tricky part. This is where that and comes in. So I would say 1 and 6/10. Which, if you happen to notice, is exactly what they said over there, only in a lot shorter space than I did. All right, again, they want us to try a number line. This time they gave us less information, so we have to fill out even more. So let's start with our fraction. So this becomes 1 4/10, and my marker is not small enough, so I'll do the best I can. It's 1 7/10, 1 8/10, 1 9/10, and if I add one more tenth, I get 2 0/10, which is weird. We don't ever write it like that. That would just be a 2. All right, so now down here, I have one whole and I have 1/10, so there's a 1 in my tenths place. So then 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9. So what is the same as 1 6/10? 1.6. So Tara rode her bicycle, and if I write this again, 1.6 miles. Hopefully that makes sense. This should be pretty straightforward. Again, if you do have questions, please feel free to ask in any of the usual ways. Comment, Parents Can Dojo, you can email me. All right, so try this. So go ahead and try this. It says, write 1 as, and let me move this so you can see it a little better here. Write 1 as a fraction and as a decimal. So it says shade the model to show 1 and then fill in to answer with the decimal. So I'll just give you a second there. You can jot that down on your paper or on scrap paper, whatever, just to make sure you're actually doing it. All right, so shading to show 1. Well, that 1 is a 1 whole. So that means I have to shade in the whole thing. And what fraction is that? Well, I shaded in 10 out of the 10 parts. So as a fraction, it's 10/10. Now, when I go to write the whole as a decimal, well, I know the 1 goes in the 1 column, but do I have any tenths or hundredths? No. So I can just put a 0 there. So when I want to write the decimal, I can just write it as 1.0 or 1.0. Again, normally, for the most part, we would just write that as a 1. We wouldn't try to get fancy. All right. Next, so share and show. Okay, so write 5/10 as a fraction and as a decimal. And they give you both a grid and the chart to use. Then they want you to write the fraction or mixed number and the decimal shown by the model. All right, so go ahead, pause the video, do the math, and then unpause it, and then we'll talk about the answers. All right, 5/10 as a fraction is exactly what you think it is, 5/10. As a decimal, 5/10 means the 5 is in the tenths place, which is one decimal place. So now if I were to shade these, I would have half of those shaded. I have 0 ones and I have 5/10. What that would look like. So now if I come down to number 2, I have 1 whole, 2 whole, 2 wholes, and 2/10. So as a mixed number, 2 and 2/10. And how do I write that as a decimal? Well, I know I have a whole number 2, decimal point, and I still only have tenths. This whole lesson is all about tenths. So I have 2/10. So 2.2. Normally that looks more like that. All right, now we have a number line one that they did here. So we need to figure out what this guy over here is. So if this is 5/10, that's 10/10, they must go up by 1. So 6/10, 7/10, 8/10. And as a decimal, that's going to be 0.8. So here's a fun challenge for you. Find a parent, sibling, or other person in the house and go ahead and explain to them how to write 1 and 3/10 as a decimal. They may look at you a little weird, but that's okay. Just tell them it's part of your math homework. All right. Then, when you're done telling them, come back, pause the video, and go ahead and try the rest of this page. So on this page, I'll show you it again, what you have to do. It says write the fraction and the decimal for each of them. And the bottom section says write the fraction or mixed number as a decimal. So it gives you the fraction, you have to write the decimal. So I'll put that back there. Go ahead, pause the video, do the math, then come back and check your answers. Alrighty. I think I just wrote on my chair. Checking down the bottom here, those are divided into 10 parts. There are 4 of them shaded in, so this is 4/10 or 0.4. Coming over here, I have to look at where my numbers go to. They only go to 5/10, which means each of these is 1, so this is 1 and 1/10. So 1 and 1/10 or 1.1. Coloring this 1 whole and 9/10. So this is 1.9. And this seems to be a tenth before 3.5, which tells me it's 3.4, which is 3 and 4/10. So hopefully you were able to get through those fairly easily. So now let's try these ones at the bottom. So they gave us a bunch of fractions or mixed numbers, and we have to write it as a decimal. So this is 5.9, 0.1, 0.7, 8.9, 0.6, 6.3, 0.5, and 9.7. Oh, yikes. I guess you guys couldn't tell me you couldn't see that. And let's zoom out a little more there. Okay. Hopefully you got those all right. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask in any of the normal ways. We are going to go ahead and turn the page, or, click down to the next page if you're looking at it digitally. All right, problem solving using fractions and decimals. All right, so it says to use the table. What part of the rocks listed in the table are igneous? Write your answer as a decimal. Well, the first thing we should probably do, figure out how many things are even listed so we can begin to think about this. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, well, that's convenient that there are 10 items. That means we'll be able to write our fraction or decimal using tenths. So igneous, let's look for igneous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 igneous, so 5 out of the 10, which is 5 tenths, so 0.5 is how I'd write that as a decimal. All right, sedimentary rocks make up what part of Ramon's collection? Write it as a fraction and word form. All right, so if you look over here, sedimentary, 1, 2, 3 of them are sedimentary. So go ahead, write that as a fraction and, oh, in word form. Okay, so fraction, that's 3 over 10. Word form, I'm going to write it as 3 tenths. All right, what part of the rocks listed in the table are metamorphic? Write as a fraction and a decimal. Okay, so metamorphic, there's 2 of those. So a fraction would be 2 tenths, decimal 0.2. All right. We have an error analysis. Nikki wrote the following sentence in her report. Metamorphic rocks make up 2.0 of Ramon's rock collection. Describe her error. Well, what did she do? Yeah, you probably guessed it. She put the 2 in the ones place instead of in the tenths place. That 2 should be 0.2, not 2.0. So she just put that in the wrong place value. All right, Josh paid for 3 books with 2 $20 bills. He received $1 in change. Each book was the same price. How much did each book cost? All of a sudden, I don't feel like this has to do with fractions anymore. This is just some straight calculations. So 3 books. So we know he bought 3 books. 1, 2, 3. He paid with 2 $20 bills, and he got $1 change. So we have to figure out how much each book cost, but they don't tell us. All they tell us is that each book costs the same. But if he paid with $40 and got 1 back, that means he spent $39. And if we do 39 divided by 3, I think most of you have probably figured out that each book costs $13. All right, the last question here. Rosa has a bookshelf where she stores her book collection. 4/10 of her books are mystery books. What is the amount written as a decimal? Well, we know as a fraction, it's 4/10. So 4/10 is going to be letter C. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. I'm guessing they're going to give us some more problems to practice on the next page. Maybe if I can turn the page. All right, so essentially we have a little bit of extra practice here, and then we have the lesson 9 worksheet. What I will do for these, for the worksheet one, is I will post the answer so you can check your work. Again, none of this is for an actual grade. This is just to make sure that you're continuing to increase your education. There is a front and a back. The back is the same. It's just like the other ones have been the other lessons we have done. So I will go over real quick these last 3 questions here. Actually, I'm going to save these for the next lesson because they include a little bit that we haven't done yet. So we'll save that for 9.2. So pretty much all you have left now is to go ahead and work on the practice problems. Again, you'll be able to click on the link to see the answers so that you can check yourself as you're going. Just like in class, remember, don't do the whole page and then go check your answers, because if you're doing it wrong, you don't want to do the whole page wrong. Okay, so I guess that's all I have for you in this lesson. Thanks for joining me. I will try to get other lessons posted as soon as I can.